going to have to alternate. Anytime you address me with a question, I have to take my glasses off because it hurts to look at people from a distance. That's just how my voice is now. It's how it is now. I'm working on my first collection, and I decided to call it Press Play to Let the Movie Begin. And what's interesting is I've been writing it now, probably in theory all of my life, but definitely I've been writing it for the last 5 years, of which probably only the last 3 years, 2.5 have got sort of usable material. And it's just interesting the way that I think poetry is very non-linear. And what's fascinating for me was this poem is called Press Play to Let the Movie Begin. And I think it functions very much as the opening piece for the book, but maybe you guys have different ideas, so let's see.
Cool. Exclusive.
Get off the plane first. God rewards a bias for action. Journey across borders and continents. Tread the earth gently, unlike those who made us leave our lands, once self-sufficient, now importing, exacerbating deficits. Get off the plane first, then breathe in the air. Free from dust, thick with prejudice and assumptions. Let your feet adjust to roads paved by cold weather and colder hearts. Make a home laced with anxious talk of repatriation. I was born of this. Beating anger is joyful. Resentment dissipates. My elders focused on survival so I could thrive, intertwined with dysfunction and neglect. Hurt people hurt people. Draw a line under looking over my shoulder. Process it. Document it. Then build anew. Press play to let the movie begin. Thank you.
Wow, you should have Morgan Freeman.
No, I should. When it's his time to retire, I should be getting Morgan Freeman's jobs.
That's true. Like literally.
Because
yeah,
I need to save up for that mortgage. renting is getting long.
I love it. Yeah, I liked Free from Dust.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That really hit home in many ways.
Like, you know what it's like to land on the tarmac at the airport from where we're from?
Yeah. I left once, didn't go back for a long time, went back, and I was like, these airports are like literally, nothing's like Heathrow. Because you know, you just get used to going Heathrow or Stansted, going to another country and coming back. But when
I've been to JFK, and even that is bad. Even in America, it's third world levels.
No, but it's what I like is like, I don't know if it's intentional, but it feels like you've literally, for us to enjoy the play that we're gonna see, or you know what I mean, like let's say it's a movie, it's like you've taken off and you're just like, guys, put your seatbelts on, you know, sit down calmly, this is about to happen, and you've taken us on a flight, and we haven't yet reached turbulence, but I feel somewhere along the line there's gonna be a poem where I'm gonna feel that turbulence. It's taking me up and down, and that's how I feel the journey's gonna be.
Yeah.
In what you're writing. So yeah, that's my 2 takes on it.
Yeah, because I think for me, like, community really matters in art. And I think part of what I'm trying to do, part of what I'm trying to say is that come join me.
What inspired it?
What inspired it? I think I'm getting a lot more push now from people. I mean, even my therapist has basically said that in every session she's going to remind me, how's the book coming along? How's the book coming along? And so even though I haven't necessarily sat down to go through, like I did an exercise where I went through my notepads, and I was like, it was quite interesting. Everything I wrote from 1999 to 2004 all holds up. And then from 2017 to now, everything in 2017, 18, and most of 19 doesn't hold up. And then from 2020 to present, I'm proud of everything. But beyond that, I still haven't gone and put it all in one place and tried to figure out the chronological order of things. But then as I was figuring out the chronological order of things in my head, because I was like, okay, if I'm not going to go through the notepads, let's try it in my head. And I figured out one thing, which was we haven't got an intro poem. We haven't got one that basically tells people what's happening. And it was never going to happen until I actually had created a body of work to know, okay, I think it's going a certain way. Because the one thing that's never stopped for me was I always knew what the title of the book was going to be. Because I spent more time in cinemas than I did in lecture halls during my undergrad degree. Also facilitated by the fact that I always had a friend who worked there who just let me through. So I also paid very little for my sort of film addiction.
Popcorns were cheap as well back then.
It was like £2.
Orange Mondays or Orange Wednesdays.
Yes. Yeah. So what inspired it was wanting to write that intro poem, but I think more and more I'm seeing myself through the lens of being diaspora, someone who arrived here somehow, but also some of the things that I say in the poem, which is, I think I'm trying to get to a point of actually having nuance around things. So, I'm accepting that my elders did certain sacrifices, but I'm also saying, and there were some bad things. And then I'm also saying, hurt people. And then I think a lot of where I've been recently in writing is basically saying, it's time to stop looking over the shoulder and looking forwards. Because I think one of the things that I think is very important in art is to be able to move on from certain things. I think there's a tendency in art due to capitalism that when you do something and it gets validation, you do more of it. And I'm not afraid to say this. I think I've seen this a lot when people explore things like trauma. And rather than it being a pit stop, a journey and the destination, it becomes the destination and people create a lot of work around it. And I think for me, I've been trying to write stuff that acknowledges like, okay, it's time, let's acknowledge it, let's talk about it, but let's be balanced and talk about the fact that there was a mixture of joy and things to be grateful for during those times. And I think for me, it was also important to set that agenda in the opening poem of the book so that people know from the get-go that we're going to talk about things, but this isn't going to be woe is me, this is not going to be finger-pointing. This is very much going to be about chronicling a journey with all of its twists and turns and hopefully arriving at a place of at least relative peace compared to the past.
And was that like this poem, it sounds like you wrote it like more recently compared, like you're talking about the journey in poetry. And it's really interesting because it definitely does have that, like, to me anyway, like that kind of driving seat feeling, like it's sort of, you're setting off, but it's also kind of got all that hindsight. It sounds like that. And that's a really, I mean, I can totally see why you could see it at the beginning of your collection. But I had one really, really like small question to ask you. Is the hurt people, is it supposed to be hurt people, or hurt people, hurt people?
That's a good question. And again, I think I'm autistic, so I sometimes don't always do the inflections right because I'll just talk plainly and think that people get it. I'm basically saying hurt people. So, it's a reference to the fact that I think, I've had certain things like, that I've grown up with in terms of dysfunction, abuse and everything. And I think there's an important thing to sort of look at balance, which is not to enable bad behaviour, but to have compassion for where it comes from. And I think, not to get too topical, but when we saw something like Will Smith at the Oscars, the conversations were incredibly polarised. And I think of all the people that I actually listened to talk about it, it was the R&B artist Tank on Drink Champs with Noriega, where he basically said it best. He said, look, that was definitely a hurt person doing what he did. He's in a certain place. And then they asked him, but you saying it was okay? And he's like, no, it's wrong. I'm saying it with my full chest. It was wrong. But there was a reasoning, there's a rationale. And so I think that's important because sometimes people either like to sort of condemn without actually looking at how do we understand and rehabilitate, or it sort of goes the other way where there's enabling. And I definitely came from a family where there was a lot more enabling of bad behaviour. So to sort of, and I went the other way where I just was like, nope, I just want to, you know, basically judge, condemn or whatever. So finding somewhere on the two poles to sort of sit, maybe not directly in the middle, but somewhere in there to sort of say, oh, this came from somewhere. And just to acknowledge, I think that is really important, personally.
Definitely.
Okay, next poem. I'll never get used to putting these glasses on.
You will eventually.
Yeah, but then I look up at you and it's just like, oh, it hurts because it's like someone fogged. But here, everything looks like it's in HD.
It adds so much gravitas, though.
It's what I'm hoping for. This poem is called Love Is. Loving is risky, like swimming in open water. Even when you feel safe, it's momentary. Speak with your heart. Learn to communicate directly. Your mind's silence will not save you. Neither will a self-help guide to feeling better. Love is unpredictable. It is not selfish. Love is when another person feels like home. Their body, their mind, the moments shared. A home, not a house. Our North Star, predetermined at the point of conception, in a record handwritten by honourable scribes. Love is what we as men were taught to swerve while wearing a straitjacket of anger, rage, repressed tears through screwed faces and clenched jaws. My heart has been thawed, not momentarily. Love is when I want to feed my beau and my friends from my own table, with food prepared from only the best ingredients from my own pantry. Thank you.
You took a little gulp in between, in the middle of that poem as well. Like, the words hit you as you were reading them.
I kept my distance from this poem for a while for that reason, because every time I read it, it definitely, it hits a certain way.
I think it's one of those ones where, like, there are certain pieces that I read, and no matter how many times I've read them or how many times I've dissed myself from them, every time I read them again, it just hits. And it just hits in a certain way because it brings you back to a certain emotion. And I think, like you were talking about Akor's thing as well, like his poems could be timeless because they don't necessarily have a timeline. And I've noticed that with the first two poems as well. Like, yeah.
I think it's different to what you're used to hearing from me as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Like I've heard you be vulnerable as well, but to be that beautifully vulnerable about like something which I know you've spoken about but you've never expressed in a poem, it's nice and refreshing to hear.
Every time I hear a love poem now, especially in the circle, it's very alive because a lot of poets shy away from love poems and they would give excuses for writing a love poem. You know, it happened before, I was in love then, but now I'm not. And so I like the fact that you have one. And your love poem is not, it's not a profession of love in the, I would say, traditional sense, but it's talking about the risk of love and how you've grown into, coming to accept it, or how you're working your way through it. And that for me is a very peculiar perspective.
Was it written in one sit?
Yeah, to be honest, pretty much all of these were written as almost free writes in about between 5 to 10 minutes. Like that's become my writing discipline that seems to create good work, putting constraints in. I think that's the thing that I've learned is that I respond well to constraints. So yeah, this one was definitely one sitting. all of these were one sitting that you'll see tonight.
What I appreciate is you used the word straitjacket,
Yeah.
and that has so many connotations in terms of, having an outside force have that imposed on you, because that's what, institutions do.
Yes.
They enforce these straitjackets on you.
I think institutions,
Communities.
patriarchy, modern concepts of masculinity, gender roles, I think all of those things sort of impacts, I think particularly men, and the challenges that they sort of have in loving. Because ultimately a lot of this was born out of the fact of just, despite thinking, I think, despite sort of, I guess, seeing myself as slightly a bit more progressive, and then realising that when I was tested in a situation of love, that there were definite blind spots in my self-awareness, which definitely sort of impacted things for me.
Where I find the balance is when you said you want to craft it from ingredients from your own pantry, so it kind of, in the opposite to that, it's like from something that's coming from the outside, something that's coming from within, like your own pantry, your own home, within you, your own resources. That's what I love, those two ideas, like kind of contending each other.
Yeah.
Which is actually really cool.
When you said straight jacket, I had the picture that came to mind is like, Greece and like Elvis days, they wear the leather jackets. They're still straight jackets, but it's the Mr. Tough Guy sort of jackets. That's the one that I had in picture rather than suits. So
I mean, it can be both. It can be literal or metaphorical ones.
it's literally like something you put on to bring a persona.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's when you hit that, I was like, oh, I didn't even think about the straight jacket you thought of. I was thinking of
Being institutionalized.
yeah.
I've got a third interpretation actually.
Really?
Yeah, because there's like a saying in Arabic, man, hubb ma'atan, like you love someone so much you smother them.
Oh.
So it's almost like you love someone, but that love is so overly consuming that it could be the reason that someone can no longer be in love with you. In that sense.
Yeah.
So.
I really like the way that you, like there was, like at the beginning of the poem you were speaking kind of almost about what love is like for everyone, and I love the fact that you changed it to talking about what it's like for a man, and then came into more your own, like your personal experience, and it really felt like a shift in that poem of like you're starting off setting the scene of love as a generality and then kind of zoning in a bit more on your personal experience. I don't know if you did that intentionally, because it really felt like a gear shift. I mean, like, I don't know if Gail also felt
I
felt like a gear shift, like this isn't about me anymore, and that's cool because now I'm going on the journey with the poet.
I generally gear shift a lot in my writing. Like what I've found is definitely in terms of influences, I like, because hip hop is my main influence as a writer. So, liking people like MF Doom and Ghostface Killer, who don't necessarily walk in linear paths when they write. They sort of write deep from the subconscious. And what I've found, especially by trusting my subconscious this year, is I've gone back and seen stuff from the beginning of the year, and I'm like, wow, I was trying to tell myself something then. Like I didn't think I was thinking this thing in January, because I'm writing about this right now in May and June, but I'm just more aware I'm writing of it. I didn't know I was writing about it. So yeah, move on to the third poem, if that's okay. This one doesn't have a title, but if anyone thinks of a title and they want to suggest it, brilliant, I'll give you a shout out in the book. Remember, things fall apart. You could trace backwards to the roots or delight at the challenge of putting the pieces back together, rearranged, reinterpreted, a collage of memories and interpretations. Everything, everywhere, all at once. 299 thoughts, splintered, cognitive kaleidoscope. Heart radiates love like a Care Bear, pre-9 p.m. watershed, optimism, an operating system, only requiring minimal upgrades. I'll come clean when the time is right. For now, I trust you to break bread with me at your leisure. My anxiety at a bare minimum, a testament to the distance I've travelled. My trajectory, jarring. At times, a Trafalgar-like jump cut. At others, tripping over headfirst into a wormhole. Traipsing around London, Sierra whiskey, heat and humidity, faithful companions. The thermometer lies, but my frayed autistic heart does not. Forever calm in your presence. Home. Cool, thank you.
Wow.
You know, there's that line where you went,
Temperature, thermometer light.
what?
Thermometer light.
No, it's somewhere. What?
About
Oh yeah, the Care Bears. No, that. Yeah. Like I never even thought about Care Bears like that until hearing it now. Oh yeah, and they have love on your heart.
Thank all the years I've been listening to MF Doom and Cool Keith. Shout out to Ultramagnetic MCs.
When you said, I'll trust you to break bread with me or something like that.
Yeah.
Can you read that line again?
Sure. For now, I trust you to break bread with me at your leisure.
Yeah. I like how most of the poem is, it feels like you are laying out commands or instructions or rules or something. But that part just gives this liberty to the person.
Yeah.
And it's I welcome you to welcome me into you. I like that. Yeah, I really like that part.
Yeah, I think the intention of the poem to the person it's addressed to is just to let them know that they have agency. And that I want everything to be driven by their agency as opposed to driving it through my own sort of selfish wants and needs.
But I think you also need to be selfish as a poet. Like I think that poem was cathartic because it feels like you were trying to control emotions in that moment, if that whilst you're writing it. And yeah, I would say I think this is the part of being British and being too humble, which is, you know, actually let's be more honest and say this poetry is for me and it is about me, and it's if someone else gets something out of it, so be it as well. But this is how I feel at this point in time.
I think, yeah, I do get that because even when you know, the person has, whoever the poem is for, the person has their agency, you still have your desire, and this is a strong desire I want. It's like I want you, but I can't take you. I can only hope that you want me back.
Yeah.
And yeah, I get that part. It's like your poem. It does feel restrained to a certain extent. You are saying, oh, you know, I want the best for you, and you're not saying, but I hope that best for you is like I really want you to want me.
No, it's interesting because that is the entire undercurrent of the poem.
Yeah, yeah, it feels like that. It's
Now I feel very naked because you've just seen right through me.
But I think that's the great thing about like the almost like weather report part of it is you're like all of that restraint, and there's a bit where you just come in the poem to like right, because previously it's in Southwest Sierra whiskey. I love that Sierra whiskey
Yeah.
part, and then I can't remember the line. You remember it better than me. That has
Thermometer
lines. Thermometer lies. You're literally like it's almost like your personal weather report. This is where I am. This is what the thermometer's saying. This is what the weather is like.
Mm-hmm.
And you're kind of a bit like, after all the restraint, now I'm in this moment with you,
Yeah.
the other person, and this is how I'm feeling right now, and it is in the now. Whereas it started off in a very like out there, general, like let's keep it all vague.
But also it's a very English thing to be sort of like, you know, sort of like just dancing around, hopping and skipping. Then you know, oh yeah, by the way,
It's fucking hard.
Yeah, no, it's not fucking hot. My friend's not here, otherwise he'd be here to tell you that I like you.
You've always got your little cards there from them actually dropping them.
Well, no, I was more going for the ghetto blaster from Say Anything. That's my era.
I think what I like about this, it goes to what you said earlier about your appreciation for movies, because discreet, but everything, everywhere, all at once.
You got the movie reference.
Beautiful movie.
Such a good movie.
And as the poem progressed, I could see aspects of where certain scenes in that movie can link to a certain line in that poem. But I think for me, what hit home or what hit streams and made my eyes watery is when you hit home about being autistic, you know. And it's beautiful in the sense that you're looking at it from a positive perspective, sort of like a growth from being autistic, rather than just saying that this has been. It's kind of like what you're saying about traumas, that people focus on trauma, and now you've hit a stop on that trauma. I'm autistic, this is the trauma bit.
I'm quite open about that identity, because I think for me, ever since, I'm 41 now, and I got diagnosed with autism at 49, and I was 40, just about 40, I got diagnosed with ADHD. I think for me, leaning into that has been also great for my work, because what I've realised is that the things that made me utterly dysfunctional and unfit for normal life, like, being smart but being utterly unable to hold down a job most of my life, and just going, the things that make me quote unquote broken for that actually lend me very well to being creative and being an artist. And so the more I've leaned into that, just the more I've been finding different recesses of my mind. And like for me, Everything Everywhere at Once was a great choice, because I'm also obsessed with time travel and timelines and things, and some of that features in previous work that I've done. And again, it just connects with something like ADHD, where it feels like my brain's splintering in like 299 directions. That whole choice of number is because it's a prime number. So it gets across the fact that my mind goes in different places, but prime number, because also autistic people have obsessions with numbers, and I'm no different. Like, I went through a whole few years where I just literally every time I saw a phone number or a number plate, I was like, is that a multiple of 3? And I came up with all these mathematical hacks.
I made
Get a referral from your GP. I know, I'll coach you through the whole thing.
I made up like a fictional insurance company, and I was like, okay, if someone has a car registration plate which adds up to 9, then they get 30% off. But if they get anything less than that as well, then they get nothing. But yeah, no, literally every time I go past a car, I'm always like, okay, is this a multiple of 9? If it's not, then you can't be part of my insurance company.
Can I just say, I need to make sure it's not. 4 words. I understand you. I could get you.
Do you know what, as in like, I referenced you in like a conversation at work, because we were talking about...
Okay.
It was like, but autism came up as part of the conversation, and someone said, but if you're like in your 40s, why would you even want to know if you got autism or not? And I was like, well, my friend, actually for him, it was the catharsis of knowing it and actually knowing himself better.
Yeah, and it's not even a catharsis. It's about being able to understand yourself better, but to actually live a more optimal life. Because in so many instances, I've just explained, like, okay, I've got this quirk, or I'm struggling with this in communication, and it's just allowed me to have better interpersonal relationships.
Some people with certain types of labels or categories, it could be a hindrance to them, but for you, it seems like it actually propelled or...
Yeah, I don't think it's fixed. It could be a hindrance for certain people. It can be good for certain people. It depends on the person and how you've been getting on through life. Like for me, I do take things literally. I can't understand subtext, and all those things make for very strained interactions. Like now I understand, for example, I'm good at one-to-one. I'm quite challenged in sort of larger social groups and contexts. It also just helps me to understand things because I'm living with long COVID, quite an acute case of it. And as it's exacerbated my autism, I'm now really struggling with sensory issues, sound and whatnot. And knowing that I'm autistic, that's given me the framework to understand that, okay, it's rooted in that. And those symptoms have now bubbled to the surface through another chronic condition. And just being able to understand that just means I can do things like buy myself earplugs or buy myself little devices that just help separate sound out so that I'm not overwhelmed. I'm a huge advocate for getting diagnosed, but everyone sort of feels very differently on that.
I think, sorry, just
No.
before you finish, I think listening to your poetry and coming from the perspective of not necessarily being a poet, I think the word home, you mentioned it in 2 of the poems, and I think even with what everyone's been speaking about, because I'm sure most people have heard your work, and that is the first time I'm hearing your work, even with all the travel and the journey that everyone's talking about, I think the fact that you just mention the word home, but you don't necessarily delve into it too much, but just you touch on it, but for me it resonates most. I suppose probably because you're exploring all these other things, but then there is still this kind of anchoring point maybe.
Yeah, I mean, home is an interesting concept. I mean, again, going to my age, being someone who's 41, born in 1981, lived under Thatcher, lived under Norman Tebbit, lived under being told that there could be repatriation because of the way this country looked at immigrants, and going, okay, so this isn't home. But then at the age of 12, without warning, being yanked out of school by my mum, taken to Pakistan for 5 years during my teens in the 90s, and going, okay, this doesn't feel like home. And then returning back to England where it felt more like home because it was New Labour and it was a more progressive time. And then I think, as Abdullah can attest to, 9/11 happening, and then going, okay, now it's not home for people who have my name, but it is still home for certain other people who were otherized. And then just trying to figure out what that means, and then actually trying to create a home when I was married, and I have a child as well. And then that also not being like home. And then moving house, I think 8 times in 3 years during my divorce, which was a very tumultuous period in my life. And then even after that, for a couple of years, there was insecurity around how, where I'd live and stuff. And then also finding safety in people and going, okay, maybe this person's my home. And then that being disrupted where in certain instances it was bereavements during COVID, and just life changing. So for me, it's like home it's an ongoing search. So I'll move to the next poem. And again, this doesn't have a title, so if anyone has any idea. Actually, someone did come up with a title for this. Yes, the title for this is Magic Will Snowball. Once I get out of bed, magic will snowball at breakneck pace. My 0 to 60, a thing of beauty. I step out of my body, transfixed, step back in, out of my head, into my body, an optimal state. Hard for me to access, but I'm stubborn. Call me mule, goat, or mighty ox. I pull my cart without complaint. Conserve energy, strategic. Not every ground is a battleground. Wartime, I thrive. Peacetime, not so much. It'll change. For now, discerning between the two helps. Love, romantic, platonic, tectonic plates shift, constant flux. United in grief, we cry together, laugh separately. We cry separately, laugh together. Codependency consigned to the waste bin. screwed up in a ball, 3-point jump shot, perfectly poised, smiling, laughing with my whole body. If I knew then what I know now, stop it, be present, hold head high, hazel green eyes locked forward, can't stop, won't stop, but finally, I have room for passengers. Let's all share in a harvest for the world.
Love that. Just thinking about Steph Curry just chefing it. Good point.
The funny thing was that I actually had the whole thing rehearsed for when I perform on stage, which is actually, because I don't use a microphone, so I don't have to worry, which is actually to just get up and just do the 3-point jump shot. And I'm sitting here and I'm going, no, this is not the right time, Haroon, just keep your head down, just read, get to the end of the poem, this is not the right context. No. But I might just get that piece of paper for the performance and scrunch it up, but yeah.
It reminded me of having those fake hoops in your house where you're just practicing shots. But I like how you touched on the point about being present, because everyone always thinks about, oh yeah, now I get it. Let me apply, back in the past, then life will be different. Because it's always funny, because I always ask, or I've been asked multiple times, like, if you could go back in time, what would you change? And I always say nothing really. Because if you change something, you're not going to be where you are today. You're not going to learn what you've learned. So I think that point you've raised hits home.
Yeah, no, I think this year has been a big year of having that realization. Because again, I was at like a 10-year reunion for where I went and did my master's at business school. And I was talking to someone else who's South Asian. And she was just talking about, we were basically bonding over sort of similar upbringings, being South Asian and just certain restrictive things because we're both in our 40s. And her thing was like, man, where I could be now if all those things were straightened then. And I was like, no. If there's things you want to do, it isn't, like I am a strong believer in the fact that it's not too late. You make a choice at a certain point if you want to go and do a certain thing, and you just make it a priority. And maybe you won't succeed at it, whatever that definition of success is, because even, definitions of success are ones that we really need to sort of unpick because they're viewed through the lens of capitalism. But I still think deciding, however late, like for me, I remember when it was literally unavoidable, 2 months before my 36th birthday, and I'm just looking at my marriage going, it isn't circling the drain, it's circled the drain. I'm now hearing those noises when the water is dripping through the pipes, and it's done, it's toast, so what now? And I think for me it was like, well, if the next 35 years resemble the first 35, that's not going to be great. So you make a choice. Even if things don't fully succeed, that's still preferable than to sort of sitting and sort of saying, well, if knew then what I know now. Hence, I wrote that, and literally it was like a stern, angel on the shoulder going, no. And then that was me like, okay, I'm going to transcribe that and write that in the poem. But also just wanting that so that people can sort of hear that, so that they go, okay, I go through that, and then hopefully maybe they'll tell themselves, no, let's look forward now.
But I love the fact that it started in a really common experience. It goes so much bigger, but it starts off with that experience we've all had of you're still horizontal in your bed thinking, I'm going to smash today. When I just get up, snooze, 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 snooze. And then you beat yourself up and your days could be ruined unless you have that angel on your shoulder.
Yeah.
And then you scoped it right out. But I love where it started, and then it's sort of like it felt common, and then it became again more personal, like
Yeah.
this poem.
And I think mine was born out of certain things. So, given the on camera, I mean, like a trigger warning. So I reached a real low at New Year's and it wasn't the first time, and it won't be the last. And I've got enough reasons not to do it. But like I've struggled with suicidal ideation since I was about 9, and I was in a real dark place at New Year's. And basically, from New Year's all the way through to the first week of April, and Abdullah knows this because I've had conversations, unless you were paying me to DJ, or unless you were asking me to significantly like perform, I literally lived under my duvet for that time. It was one of probably the strongest depressive episodes I've had in a long time. And so the poem was sort of born out of that, which is almost a reminder of like, if I can just snap myself out or not let myself get back to that position, or even if I do, if I can just take that first magical step to get out, things will happen that are good, but it's just making that choice. But I have had periods, and this was another one of them. I think this is probably the longest, because I literally, like I said, unless you knew me through poetry and you saw me DJ or do certain things, most people didn't hear from me for a good 3-4 months, like absolute radio silence. And so, yeah, the poem is about trying to basically, again, make sense of that. But at the same time, I think there's something about wanting to sort of document things so that other people can read and they can take from it what they will. Hopefully it catalyzes something and can sort of give them, a potential, an idea of what one roadmap could look like. I'll go into the next one. The penultimate poem. This is very, very short. This one's called Supper on the Moon. Electric synaptic pulses, chaotic collisions, fleeting thoughts and feelings, dopamine dips, mood crashing, creating a crater around me, trapped, unable to climb, steep gradient of my own making, hyperactivity making me claw my way senselessly out of my prison, madness, a constant companion, heightened, correlating with lunar cycles, a straight line to self-loathing. Breathe. Sit still in silence. Self-awareness swells. Madness, when harnessed and embraced, the key to unlocking my unique operating system. Thank you.
We need to normalise starting off poems with scientific references.
What's that?
We just need to normalise just using scientific.
I forgot you're a science teacher.
Oh, yeah, no, as soon as
Biology.
Seconded.
Exactly.
Oh yes, scientist.
Absolutely.
I've got the right crowd today, man. The stars just align.
Science represents.
Or as the character in Breaking Bad goes, "Science, bitch."
I was one for the Martians. We're gonna science this shit.
You get us.
See, more pop culture references, movie references. I'm happy.
Short and sweet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is that the sound of science? Like, is that what happens when you have science? Because for me, when I'm alone, my thoughts, that's when everything starts racing. But at least that's,
My thoughts do get racing, but I think
too much.
I think again, writing that was about me trying to figure out I need to get good at being comfortable in silence, because my lack of comfort in silence is what drives me to say things, do things, which 9.5 out of 10 times are not great. Those things that could have been easily left on the cutting floor.
When you have that pause, do you think the pause was too short or too long?
I don't know, because it's the first time I did it. So I remember writing this in a writing group on Clubhouse, and there was no pause or silence. And then I was sitting in a coffee shop, shout out Brixton Blend. You guys are great. I mean, you actually have plugs where I can charge up my laptop, so thank you. And also the alliteration is great in your name. It appeals to the copywriter in me. And I was just reading it, and it was just natural. I was like, okay, let's do silence. Let's do the breathing thing. Plus, I'm gonna completely cop out, and I'm gonna throw it back to you. Do you think it was too short or too long?
I think we just spoke about this recently.
I will not take responsibility for my work or how it's interpreted.
Because I have a good, some of my poems have, when I write, because I poetry, I do that thing where if I want a space for breathing in it, I would actually keep that space in the text. So I have, tap, 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 and word at the end. And you said that you do that a lot. There's always one word thrown at the end. But a friend of mine, a poet, Anne Holloway in Nottingham, she said that whenever you pause, when you pause for something on stage, right, however fast you think you are, wait a little longer. Like, it's always is faster to you. And I like the way you did the breathing, then you talked about breathing, then you paused again. It was good. It's nice. Just try stretching. I would say just experiment and see how far you can stretch it. And
Yeah.
Just 5 minutes, just silent on stage, but like,
Abdullah just be there, like, just holding up an iPad with where the numbers are going into the red.
My pen started working again, by the way. Yeah, these thoughts are in trouble.
Yeah, so I always try pushing it a little bit.
Yeah.
Because I'll start feeling uncomfortable. Like I'm not saying anything, I'm on stage, people are looking at me, and so I'll just cut it short. So I always push it. Let's see how far into my discomfort I can get in silence when I'm holding it.
And just use Mississippi's. Mississippi.
Sip, you'll miss.
Me and Meta are not going to go there because we've been there a few times. A favourite pastime.
I like the breathing.
Yeah.
It's funny actually. Ironically, so one of my friends did a post today, and she was like, in the comments, mention what you're grateful for. So whenever I do gratitude, my number one gratitude is I'm grateful for breathing. That's the number one thing I'm always grateful for first thing in the morning.
That's cool. I'm grateful of that thing.
Yeah, 100%. Like, yeah, because a lot of people forget about it, but it's like there's different types of breathing. People think there's just like one type, but it's like literally we breathe automatically, but then we can be conscious when we breathe.
Yeah.
But then like trying to control your breath is a lot harder than people think. And if you've ever done breath exercises, that's harder than actually just exercising.
I need to talk to you about that because I was watching the Kendrick Lamar performance on Glastonbury, and I have never seen such impeccable breath control from any rapper in my life performing live.
It's the goal. I've been telling you from day. I saw it in 2010.
Well, I need to start taking some instructions from just some of the breath control and breathing exercises that are out there.
Like,
I need to work on.
People forget the power of breathing. It's what all actors do. It's what all dare to play people do. It's all about your breath. So I enjoyed that. And as an audience, I was going to ask you, because obviously you're more animated, is your aim to also have the audience breathe with you, or because I subconsciously kind of did.
I think for the breathe part, it's not so much that I want them to breathe with me. I want to catch them off guard a little bit.
Which I think happened.
With the silence as well, because I think for me it was. So when I actually did this earlier, I didn't actually think about the breathing. Like, it passed through my head. I was like, nah, I'll just do the silence. But for me, doing it as like a 1-2, like I love, for someone who doesn't watch boxing and can't box for shit, I seem to keep referring to boxing metaphors, but it's a dab, it's a 1-2. Because I think one of the things that is really important is, and and I think, Swavi, you do this impeccably, is the theatricality of the performance.
Thank you.
That's really important. You're welcome.
But I think it's also
Real recognise real.
it's also because your poems are in, like, there's a couple of them that are like they're instructions, like you're
Yeah.
telling people what to do, and like once you get into the middle of that poem, you basically got us all in the palm of your hand.
Yeah.
Then you go breathe, and then you kind of want to follow the instructions.
Mhm.
It feels like the
Yeah.
poem has been giving you a roadmap.
And even what you're talking about breathing, a friend of mine, when she would come back home, then she was my housemate for a while, and she would just sit down and just sigh loudly. And at first she was like, "Yo, I'm not irritated, nothing. It's just it helps." And a good sigh, if you've not done it in a while, I mean, we can try it now. It's actually really good. Just,
Isn't that what parents do every time they get out? Like, it's almost like they do like a hydraulic pressure.
Yeah.
Sit down.
It does work for me. It's
You're
like,
just enabling that middle-aged, like,
It's like, ah.
a good sigh, just.
No, you see, when you know someone that's fine, so when we've got a colleague who comes in and she goes, oh, shit. Please don't say about your day.
But that's the thing, it's the tone of the sign.
Is the
Yeah,
tone of the
exactly.
sigh.
There's actually,
There's the one that,
variations.
like, you're not about to
Yeah.
complain, everything is okay, I just, there's that feeling it gives
Yeah.
me. And
Yeah.
Yeah. Now it's interesting you say that because when I'm at work, there's different sides. Yeah. Now there's strength in the side.
Cool. I'm going to close out with my final poem, and it's called When We Move. Grief, love, neither are linear, each a dreamlike state, casting bewitching silhouettes. Last weekend, a celebration of an awkward boy from Myersfield Estate. Lessons of love can't be contained, spilling out onto grotty pavements, only to then hold up traffic, reminding the new locals who really owns our neighbourhood. Sound crashes through speaker cones, throwbacks to sound clashes. Needles explore grooves. Genre is a construct. Could heaven ever be like this? Free. No price of admission. XX, XY, and everyone in between. When we move up and to the right, the whole world follows in our path. Your memory, I hold close. Your absence is real. Yet, you're here. A guide, a reminder of the presence of love. I am loved. I am love. I am a reflection of the love you afforded me. A lifeline. I'm confident. My head always above choppy waters. A story that seemed far off. Thank you.
Since when did you start singing?
Since that poem. You might see more of it.
Yeah. Do you know what? That poem goes to what you said about it being instructions when you mentioned guide. Like, and I think it's nice to kind of end on that because it kind of like spirals back to all the other pieces, nitpicking certain things. And like I said, I knew it was a plane and we just landed, literally.
Yeah.
I appreciate that.
the line you go spilling out on grotty pavement, right? So she edits for me. I think when we're talking about it, she has a very sharp scalpel. And one of her points for me was my adjectives and adverbs. I use them a lot, right? And she was like, why is it there? And so I'm asking that
Grotty.
Is that intentional?
It's very, very intentional because I'm talking about the fact that, we hold up traffic. We're reminding the new locals who really owns our neighbourhoods. I'm talking about gentrification. And so it's important when I say love can't be contained, it's because it's literally a party that's spilled out onto the streets. When I say grotty pavements, It's me. It's almost like being influenced by Nas, where Nas gives you these snapshots. He's giving you a visual. It's like a screenplay. So there, being a fan of film, that was very much my screenplay. It was very much my screenplay, like reference or influence. So, part of the inspiration for this is, I think you probably got the reference, it's about Ty. And for those who don't know, Ty was sort of one of the great hip-hop artists within hip-hop's history. He was based in Brixton, and someone who, while didn't have the commercial success, nominated for a Mercury Music Prize, very much a hip-hop artist's favourite hip-hop artists. So people like Jay Dilla, The Roots, LP, Run the Jewels were all huge fans. And what you were talking about with regards to Brixton, it can never be gentrified. Obviously, my introduction to Brixton was through Ty, through a chance meeting at Talib Kweli gig this is showing my age as well, at Subterranea in West London off Ladbroke Grove in 2000, when the Reflection Eternal album came out. And we ended up... Well, it's a good thing Terry and Cher aren't here, because they'd be like, I wasn't even born. Oh no, they were 2 years old back then.
No, he's compound sentence adults now.
Yeah, no, but the thing is that but going back to the original point with Ty, I was hanging out with him late one night where I was just going to go traipsing through a certain area, and he just says, Haroon, I know Brixton's been gentrified, but Brixton's still Brixton. Go that route. Safer. Go home. So yeah, it's an interesting one. I still think that Peckham has somehow managed its relationship with gentrification differently. Like Brixton is gentrified and it's not gentrified at the same time. It's not a mistake that it's my set that led to a discussion on gentrification. Anyone who knows me will be like, for fuck's sake, Haroon.
Well,
You couldn't even take a night off.
That's why you need to hurry up finishing your book.
Yeah.
Let him know. Tell him.
So you're now joining the Let's Prod Haroon with a really big stick club.
I've been prodding Haroon to be more on stage since I saw you perform the first time.
And when was that?
That was BYOB, but I can't remember which one.
But it wouldn't have been. But it wasn't this year, because this year.
Before you DJ'd.
You saw me then.
Yeah.
2019, 2020.
Yeah, just before. I think it was the one just before COVID. There's a couple just before.
Yeah,
COVID.
I went a couple of times.
Yeah, I remember I saw you then.
But the thing is I've only felt comfortable performing this year, partly because of where I'm at in my journey and just getting comfortable in my skin. But I think the changing point, and Meta was there for it because he filmed it.
I was there in the early days.
Yeah, was no.
Yeah, with my this. Yeah.
So I was part of I joined an autistic theatre troupe where we did a showcase, and basically there were 2 mini plays. There was a monologue, and then there was improv comedy. And where I slotted in, and it was crazy, because when I got together with the troupe, that's the most number of autistic people I've been in the room with at the same time. Like it wasn't even a big troupe. I think there was less than 10 of us. So imagine whatever background you identify from, whether you're Iraqi, you're Nigerian, and just think about you reaching the age of 40 and going, oh wow, it's the first time I've been with like 8 people like me. It was mind blowing. And basically during that time, I spent a lot of time rehearsing and being directed and just learning to feel a bit more comfortable in my body and my voice. And that's when I think I started performing this year, feeling more comfortable. And that's when you started coming up to me more. I'm like, okay, more please.
I think that's the difference, right? We talking about performance. I'm still talking about the words.
You're saying just get on the stage to share the words.
Yeah, because when everyone talks about, I don't want to go on stage because I'm not, like, I don't know how to perform. I'm like, you can read.
No, but I can do both now.
Yeah, exactly.
But I think mainly...
But I just wanted to hear Haroon.
Well, there is a well-known poetry night in Northwest that occasionally,
Do you know a guy
in a place in South London, which some people would say isn't South London, that could give me a chance to. what I'm trying to say is that this will just happen now. This is a feature set.
But I'm just saying this.
I'm letting you know. I'm putting you on notice. My boss and my employer. But this goes back to what Claire was saying. I'm more comfortable being instructive now. It's that, but also I put it down to just watching Tank in interviews, being so confident. I'm like, Tank. You recognise the brilliance that is Tank.
So let's talk about.
Can you actually on camera just come here and just I want to dab, just celebrating Tank, and just to let you know, Tank, if you're watching,
So it's like
studio session.
The thing is, right?
It's like a live stream.
Not just that, I'm doing a Woody Allen thing. I keep breaking the fourth wall and looking into the camera. So I'm just saying, Meta, when you're looking at this in the editing suite, capture these shots in the cut.
That's about going in your lane, right?